What's going on, everyone? I'm Travis Brown alongside the man, Jay Arnold. We're here for our weekly X's and O's breakdown of what happened. What happened in A&M's last game? And I think that's what everyone came away with is what happened in A&M's 17-14 loss at Appalachian State. Jay, first off, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing all right, Travis. It was an interesting weekend for sure. I'm a little bit tired. I was up in Chicago, flew up, got there 12:30 Friday night, and flew back 7:45 Sunday morning. So a very quick turnaround, and I'm a little bit just still recovering from that.
Well, I think there's probably a lot of people on the A&M fan base that are still recovering from the weekend. So let's bring some catharsis to them, or maybe at least some understanding,
Some closure, perhaps.
Some closure. Yeah, that's probably the best way to put it. So, of course, Appalachian State, the Sun Belt comes in. I think it was the very popular Sickos committee that tweeted that the Sun Belt woke up the cheesiest this weekend, like the Cheez-It commercial.
I guess A&M can probably take a little bit of solace in the fact that they aren't the only team to get upset by a Sun Belt team. Marshall on the road at Notre Dame comes away with a win, and then Georgia Southern ends up beating Nebraska, which led to the firing of Scott Frost. But A&M was also an unfortunate victim of the Sun Belt and managed to be upset by a very good, very strong Mountaineers team. I think we're going to be talking a little bit about the Sun Belt East Division this year.
Yeah, for sure. I did in my column this year. Past week, I said, hey, in 2 or 3 years, A&M can be looking at this saying, hey, A&M lost to the Sun Belt champion, who is one of the top 6 rated champions, and they're a college football playoff team, but not yet, not so fast, not yet. So, it's by every metric you can look at as far as rankings and everything go. This was an upset. A&M was number 6. Appalachian State wasn't ranked, but the numbers tell a little bit of a different story, don't they?
Yeah, they do. You look at every measurable metric in this game, and it looks like Appalachian State just demolished Texas A&M. It looks like Appalachian State probably would have been favored. If you come into this game and you look at the stats and you have no knowledge of the two teams previous and saw what Appalachian State did to Texas A&M on the road, you would just assume that Appalachian State is the higher ranked team. And hats off to them. I mean, they played an incredible game. Time of possession, which is something that Jimbo Fisher likes to place a premium on. 41 minutes, 29 seconds, App State to Texas A&M's 18 minutes and 17 seconds. App State ran the ball for 181 yards. Texas A&M only had 186 yards of total offense. App State's running they ran 80 plays. Texas A&M runs 38. And then you look at the other crucial aspects that may have kept A&M in this game. A&M also loses the penalties, 7 penalties for 60 yards, and the fumbles. The turnover battle, they lost 2 fumbles, whereas Appalachian State was able to recover their 1 fumble. So by every metric on the charts, Appalachian State dominated this game.
Yeah, for sure. Now, a lot of what Appalachian State was doing well to get that time of possession was kind of running the ball at will at times. And yeah, Jimbo Fisher said after the game, it wasn't these big chunk running plays. It was 3 and 4 yards at a time, but 3 and 4 yards at a time gets you first downs and it drains that clock. From my perspective, my vantage point, that defensive line against Sam Houston State got a pretty great push against the Sam Houston State offensive line. We're able to get in the backfield, but against Appalachian State, there really wasn't any penetration, especially against that run blocking. And that was evident on those 4th down conversions that they made where they needed a yard and they knew they were going to get a yard.
Yeah. And this is a time where I'm looking at another statistic here. Texas A&M had 0 tackles for loss in this game. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, if that doesn't tell you that there was getting no penetration, we talk about in defensive line play, resetting the line of scrimmage. And what you want to do is basically make those offensive linemen take a step back. Obviously, that's not always going to happen. And Appalachian State had a very, very experienced set of offensive line here. You have 4 starters that are returning starters. I believe, I mean, everybody except the center was a senior. And I think that experience kind of showed through there. There's some little tools and tricks of the trade that you get from battling in the trenches in college football that, maybe some of that inexperience along the defensive line for A&M kind of reared its ugly head. But the other fact of the matter is, in the running game, Cameron Peoples especially was always falling forward. And if A&M's not able to get penetration and then they're having trouble shedding blocks up front, if the defensive line isn't able to cross face whenever Cameron Peoples is getting through the offensive line, the linebackers have to meet the running back in the hole. The problem with that was, like I said, Cameron Peoples is constantly falling forward. So he's getting that extra 1 or 2 yards, and they add up. It's why A&M gave up 181 yards rushing. Like you said, there wasn't a lot of huge chunk plays running the ball, but it was consistent, and they were able to impose their will against the Texas A&M defense that was on paper as more talented. And that's something that's got to be worrisome heading into a very rough stretch of games for Texas A&M coming up.
So now you got into it. Just real quick, define, what does resetting the line mean for defensive linemen?
Yeah, so when we talk about resetting the line of scrimmage, especially against the run, you at the snap of the ball, you want to make sure that the offensive line moves backwards. What this does is it gives the linebackers a little more space to filter off of your defensive line and fill holes. But it also forces the running back to make a decision on a cut or what lane he's going to hit earlier on in the process. And that's why whenever the offensive line from Appalachian State is able to get a little more push, it makes it easier for the running back. He has more time to react to the situation in front of him. 2, it makes the linebackers make a decision earlier on as well. So it's the catch-22 of why the trench battle matters so much, especially in the run game, because those split seconds that can impact a decision, every little second you get to make that decision helps. So when you're not resetting the line of scrimmage, the linebackers have less time, the running back has more time, and then you get situations like Saturday where Appalachian State's able to get like 3 or 4 yards every time they're running the ball.
So from you as a defender's perspective, I doubt you probably ever had a situation like A&M was in the third to fourth quarter, where I think App State started with the ball with like the 9-minute mark in the third quarter, and A&M didn't get the ball back till about the 7-minute mark of the fourth quarter with the defense being on the field. But as a defender, what is it like when you just can't get off the field like that in a marathon drive? How do you maintain or push down the frustration? How do you just go through the whole mentality of that kind of marathon?
It's a snowball effect. And I mean, the good thing with A&M having as much depth as they do, you want to rotate guys in and out. And App State did give them an opportunity by subbing out as well to kind of get fresher legs out there. But it's a snowball effect where you feel the momentum, and it does get frustrating where you're not able to get off the field. And that's something that can be also impacted if the offense isn't able to get any momentum going. You give up one long drive, and then the offense has a chance to try to get something going and aren't able to. You're right back out on the field. And it's something that can definitely take a mental toll. Obviously, I mean, the longer you spend out there, the more wear and tear that you're going to take up front. And it's tough. I mean, there's a few times when we played teams that were driving the ball, and it's not as common nowadays just because of the more explosive nature of offenses. You see more big plays, but there is something very, very demoralizing about a team basically being able to march down the field and impose their will. And there were some things that A&M did that also allowed them to keep drives going when they could have had stops. And that's getting into the penalty talk and things like that. But it is a very tough spot to be in mentally.
Yeah, for sure. So I think A&M fans who are watching this will hear you talking about resetting the line, the trouble getting penetration into the run against run blocking. How does A&M fix this? Because moving forward, it's only going to get tougher from here on out when you face Miami and then you get into SEC conference play. Shedding blocks isn't going to get any easier.
No. I mean, the one thing I would say about this is, again, this is a very inexperienced unit. So there should theoretically be improvement as the season goes on. You got young guys. I mean, there was true freshmen out there along the defensive line, sprinkled in and out during the whole game. I mean, I saw LT Overton in there quite a bit. And again, this is what I was talking about when you don't want to read too much into a game against the FCS opponent. You're still replacing 4 starters. Mm-hmm. This was always a risk. And the guy who I thought was going to be the anchor of this defensive line, the one that had the most experience last season, McKinley Jackson, hasn't been able to go. So mm-hmm. I think that's another thing that hurts this unit quite a bit. But as far as how did they improve, I mean, a lot of this could just be experience. And you have a defensive line with 4 new starters against an offensive line that has 4 returning starters. That can cause a lot of problems. You're not going to have too many offensive lines. And again, they may be a talent match for Texas A&M, but that experience gap was huge. And I think it showed a lot on Saturday.
Yeah, I'm going to put you on the spot here because I think that for someone who has played football, has seen the inside of the college practices and whatnot, it's one thing. But to the lay person, you talk about teams gain experience. Well, I think sometimes the only idea that people might have of that is when you're playing Madden and one game a guy's a 78 and 3 games later he's an 81 and you're like, oh, he gained experience, he got better. Is there an example that you can give, or what is something tangible where it looks like a guy has improved from game to game, kind of into the minutia of it, if that makes sense?
Yeah, it's tough because I mean, some of this is situational as well, where you see a guy who may make plays that he wasn't making early in the season. I mean, look at like a guy like when he first got into A&M, Myles Garrett, for example. Mm-hmm. Obviously, you know, the physical tools are there, but there are some mental things, reacting to the speed of the game, especially on like a zone read where a quarterback may pull it, and a guy like Myles coming out of high school is used to making those plays. Mm-hmm. All of a sudden you get to college and it's a completely different speed and athlete at quarterback. Every guy is one of the top guys on the field, coming from the high school game. So it's something physical where you make those adjustments mentally in the game, and then also getting a feel for the flow of the game. Mm-hmm. Right. So it may be that you're in the film room and you know how you're supposed to react to a certain block, but you're not used to employing that in action yet against mm-hmm. live opponents. And sometimes the only cure for that inexperience is to get thrown in the fire. And I think that A&M was in the fire on Saturday.
From your experience, when you talk about like kind of the game slowing down, it's another cliche. I like to kind of break through sports cliches on some of these. When you talk about things slowing down, do you find that just experience going through the game, you see that the game slows down and therefore you're able to put your hand in the right place, make the right move, make the right read? Or is it by learning how to put your hand in the right place, do the right swim move or whatever in that situation, that the game slows down? Or is it a little bit of both? That's kind of a chicken and the egg question.
Yeah, I think it has to be a little bit of both, because you look at something like putting your hand in the right position, you know, technically you don't have to be as technically sound in certain games, right? Mm-hmm. The higher level of opponent, the higher level of experience you're facing, the more technically sound you need to be, to make the plays that you need to. And part of that is adjusting to being that kind of more technical approach to the game. And part of it is recognizing the situation that you're in. You know, if you react to an offensive line, you know, blocking down, maybe it's something where, all right, well, I've seen on film that, you know, the left side of the film or the left side of the offensive line blocking down, we're going to have pullers at some point. There's certain motion aspects. For me, an example was playing against Auburn, right? Auburn, under Gus Malzahn, was a team that had a lot of eye candy, we call it. A lot of people going in motions, jet motion, running backs going out of the backfield, so much. But there were tendencies within that where if you recognize what Auburn likes to run out of those types of motions, you're able to adjust to the game. And that's something that the film aspect is also an adjustment for guys, right?
Mm-hmm.
In high school, you may not watch as much film. In college, it's a class, right? Like student athletes, the study of football is very much a class. So you're going in, you're watching film, and you have to make sure that you can execute based on what you've studied in film all week. And that's something that, again, is another piece of the adjustment. So you have the physical, the technical side of it, where you have to have your hands in the right place, but you also have the study part of it, where you're looking at things pre-snap or tendencies out of the offensive line, and you have to make adjustments based on that as well.
A lot of talk today in the press conference about buy-in, and Aya Smith said he doesn't feel like there necessarily was amount of buy-in right now. And you looked back at the 2020 Alabama game, said he didn't necessarily feel there was a lot of buy-in there, but it got there after that win. Is that student part of football, that football class, is that kind of buy-in? Again, another one of those cliches that you don't necessarily know if you're there. Break that apart. I know you're not in the locker room there, but generally speaking, what is buy-in?
Yeah, so obviously, like you said, I'm not in the locker room. I don't know what the buy-in specifically is in this case, but I think some of it is going back to that study.
Yeah.
And Aya Smith is talking about doing the little things, making sure. I think Damani Richardson said in the press conference, making sure guys are going to class, making sure they execute every little bit of it. And I think that maybe because there's so much youth and inexperience along this defensive line. I think some of the guys along the offensive line, there's so much hype behind this team, and they weren't really tested against Sam Houston State. Maybe they're able to get away with some bad habits in practice that aren't conducive to winning against experienced and tough teams. Maybe this is a bit of a wake-up call. They realize that, hey, if we're going to compete against the best of the best, we have to do every little bitty detail correct. And I think that's what Aya Smith is talking about. Maybe there are some times where reps are taken off. And I mean, to be honest with you, I think the conditioning of Texas A&M struggled a little bit in this game. I think there were some times where on those long drives, Appalachian State was still pushing and was able to keep the tempo up where A&M was struggling with it. And I don't mean tempo from a like a hurry up offense type. I just mean tempo from like the way the offense was executing. There weren't any breaks in play for A&M to really take a play off. I mean, they had to be at the top of their execution the whole time, or App State was able to get a first down. I mean, it's something where every moment and every placement of position or eye discipline has to be correct the entire game. And if you're not building those habits in practice, then that's not going to transfer over to competition. And I think that's what Aya Smith and Damani Richardson are probably talking about there.
Sure. So when you look at the offense, a lot of fans, a lot of people, if you look at the social media, they want to talk about scheme. They want to talk about the complexities of Jimbo's scheme. If you want to ask Jimbo about it, he talks about execution. What did you see from the scheme, from the offense in this game that was just so unsuccessful for the Aggies?
Yeah, so I think Jimbo will tell you that his scheme works, and it does when he has personnel that are able to execute it to the highest ability. I don't think you've seen that out of the A&M offense the last 2 years. The problem isn't Jimbo's scheme so much as his And he obviously has everybody questioning him, so I'm reluctant to do this, but it's his unwillingness to adapt to the personnel. I think that a lot of times the issue with Jimbo's scheme is it's a little too complex. And there's obviously some weapons on the A&M offense. I mean, you have guys like Devon Achane, Anais Smith. I mean, Evan Stewart, in spite of the fumble late in the game, is still a great offensive weapon. And when I go back and look at it, and Devon Achane has 10 carries for 66 yards, right? He's averaging 6.6 yards a carry. I mean, I feel like you got to get the guy the ball a little bit more than that. And now, granted, part of the issue is A&M only ran 38 offensive plays. That can be an issue as well. But
just close to a record low.
Yeah. When you look at Jimbo's scheme, I just think that maybe in this case, he's placing a little bit too much on Haynes King's shoulders. Maybe Haynes King or whoever the offensive leader ends up being at the quarterback position would benefit from a offense that's simplified, where there's not as many pre-snap reads or reads on routes or longer developing plays. I think for me personally, I'd like to see Haynes King get out of the pocket a little bit more. I think some of the throws that he was making when he was rolling to the right or to the left, I think they were it gave the Appalachian State defense pause because Haynes is a threat with his legs. And, obviously if Jimbo does decide to make a change at quarterback, which some people are asking for, Max Johnson is going to have his own particular issues, but we'll see if Jimbo changes the offense up at all. That's the issue that I think I'm seeing is no matter who has been at quarterback, the offense hasn't changed too much. Mm-hmm. I think it would benefit from a little more adaptation.
Mm-hmm, for sure. Penalties, another big portion of what was going on in this game. I mean, it started from the very beginning where they tried to go for it on fourth down, and a penalty gave them the first down, or it might have been third down at the beginning of the game. Penalties huge in this game.
Yeah, and so if you're the defensive lineman, you're lined up directly over the ball. That's going to be a moment on film where Coach Robinson, Coach Price are going to be coaching up that quite a bit. It's not something that's acceptable. And obviously, if it's a 4th and 1 situation, everybody on the team knows they're going to be screaming ADO, which is attempt to draw offsides. That's coming. There's going to be some kind of hard count. You have to be expecting it, and you have to have your eye on the ball. And obviously, there's some nuance to that because you also, knowing ahead of time that it's a short yard situation, you can't really afford to be late off the ball either. So there is a little bit of that extra key up, but still, if you're lined up directly over the ball, that you can't make an excuse for that. It's something that you've been playing football long enough. You got to know better.
Mm-hmm, for sure. So Miami comes in town this weekend. Another so I think a little bit surprisingly for me is a ranked matchup. A&M stays in at 24. It's going to be the big test. I think everyone coming into the season thought this would be the test to see where A&M really was, not necessarily last weekend. I know we've gone through a lot of it, but what does A&M need to do in a short week here to try to bounce back and be a little bit more the team that I think a lot of people thought they were going to be?
Yeah, I mean, here's where you find out what the heart and soul of this team is. Do they come out, put in a good week of practice? You're not going to be able to correct all the problems that are, and there are a litany of problems that A&M is dealing with. You're not going to be able to correct all those in 1 week, but you have to come out and put together a strong effort and be able to compete against a tough Miami team. I think we'll find out whether this team is going to lay down and basically just say, this season is a throwaway until 2023, or if they pick themselves back up, make some changes offensively and defensively to execute better. I mean, it goes back to what Anais Smith was talking about. There's got to be some accountability among the leaders, the older leaders on the team. You got to see guys like Anais Smith and on offense and Damani Richardson on defense step up and kind of guide some of these lesser experienced players. Offensive line, I mean, it's going to be a tough test, right? Like, you can't have another performance like this where the time of possession is completely in favor. And I think Miami's going to be its own set of challenges where I'll need to dig into their film and just kind of see what they offer. But
you don't expect them to try to hold the ball for 41 minutes of the game. They have a little bit more of an explosive offense.
Definitely a little bit more of an explosive offense. Of course, after I watched App State film against North Carolina, I would have thought App State had a bit of an explosive offense too. So,
but that's adjustment. But that's adjustments on their part. They went head to head in a shootout against North Carolina, but knew that if they could keep A&M's offense off the field, that they would be in their favor in this kind of situation. And that was a good adjustment that worked for them.
Yeah, and there was App State absolutely deserved that win, but there were some chances that the offense had. I mean, we go back to that field goal drive that A&M had a chance to tie up. There was, I think, 3 wide receivers open on that drive that Haynes King had a chance to hit, and if he puts the ball in the right place, they may still be running. I mean, there was a ball thrown behind Anais Smith. There was a ball thrown behind, I think it was Keith Brown. And then there was one where he overthrew Chris Marshall deep that Chris Marshall had a great chance on if that ball is thrown in a catchable position. So the opportunities are there. And then, I mean, I don't want to bash on Caden Davis too much for that kick either, but that's something that you also have to execute. And it just goes back to every phase of the game needs work heading into Miami.
Right. Of course.
Yep. I mean, you look at the Hurricanes and it's a big test. The good news is you get them at home. I think Van Dyke is the quarterback at Miami, correct? It's going to be, I think the secondary is going to get tested again. We'll see. I mean, if they can create some turnovers there in the back end, A&M's going to be able to compete in this game, but we have to see what this team does from a mental aspect and if they're able to rebound from a very, very disheartening loss.
Well, Jay, let's end this one the same way we did last one. What's a good meal pick for the A&M fans who are going to be prepping for this game?
All right.
I think we went whole hog pork last week. What's your pick here?
Yeah, so we'll see. I don't know if Regal's down here in Houston is going to be running the special. If they are, you'll be able to catch it in my trench warfare article. But Regal's down here in Houston does what they call a barbecuban. So it is a smoked pulled pork Cubano, right? So you got the one of the probably the sandwich that Miami is most known for is the Cubano.
There you go.
And I mean, hey, if you put a little Texan on that, what more can you ask for?
There you go. Jay, as always, thank you so much for giving a little bit of your time and your expertise. We'll, of course, be back with him next week to break down the Miami game. So, Jay, thanks so much, man.
Appreciate you having me, Travis.